this is a way which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continually reminds us of Himself. The Muslim is part of nature. He's part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. He's not separate to it. Jibreel alayhi salam comes and prays with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And this is used to give evidence. And if you want to then delay the Asr prayer a bit, so you get between the two opinions and you're in the safest position or whatever, you can do that. Is that this part of this ayah rather is talking about covering your awrah every time that you go to pray. It is recommended that the woman in those circumstances cover her face as well. Your Qiblah has gone from a Masjid al-Aqsa to al-Masjid al-Haram, time-bound obligation upon the believers. Time-bound, that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, kitab mawquta. It's a time-bound obligation. There is no complete salah in its perfection without reading al-Kitab or al-Fatihah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala habibina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Hayakumullah. Welcome everyone to a continuation to our study of Fiqh Salah according to the method which we're studying and according and upon the methodology and the ahkam of the Hanafi madhhab. We spoke last time about an introduction and some of the maqasid, some of the objectives of Salah. And this was a way of perhaps easing ourselves in and allowing us to appreciate and contemplate on the importance of a Salah in the religion of Islam. And we spoke about its great importance and weight and the gravity and the enormity of leaving it, let alone denying it. Now we are moving into the proper ahkam, the proper rulings that pertain to a salah. If you like to use Western terminologies, although they're not wholly accurate, last week was a look at the philosophy of salah, if you'd like, the importance of it on a theoretical level, which is incredibly important. And today we're going into a more traditional way of studying fiqh salah, which is related to the ahkam itself. This course itself is not going to be doing a traditional study of this matan in the sense that we will be relying upon a traditional text, but we won't necessarily busy ourselves with things which are not inherently that useful for us in the modern 21st century. Mathalan, we spoke about an example of it, about zakah, which we'll come to as the next section after we finish salah. I said to you, brothers and sisters, and we weren't going to spend time looking at the nisab of the zakah, of the nisab when it comes to the zakah of camels or sheep. However, if any of you are thinking of starting up a farm, please, after the class, stop by and inshallah we can have a discussion about how many cows you need or how many camels you need. But I think for the vast majority of us, it's not very applicable. So it's better we use that time for something else. And likewise, we're going to be doing something similar when we talk about salah, because the first section that relates to a salah in our study of this matan is as relates to awqat as-salah. Awqat as-salah. These are the timings for the salah. The reason why is, to be honest, for most of us, what do we rely on to know the timing of the salah? I don't think most of us, we look at the shadow of the stick in the ground, or we look into the horizon and we look and we see what color is the horizon now and things like, which is what they used to do, of course, and that's the accurate way of how it's determined as well in terms of our tradition and our culture. But that's not the methodology that is used today. Today, what I do is I pick up my phone, I check which app, I don't know which people do. I use Pillars, and I see the timing from the salah and khalas. However, if we want to take some considerations about the ahkam of the wisdoms or some of the hikam and maqasid behind the awqat of the salah, perhaps we can say two things. The first is the point that we mentioned last week, which was the point that this is a way which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continually reminds us of Himself and links a dhikr to the salah. And it's also the means by which, or one of the means by which rather, the salah achieves its objective of what? Because it's repeated. Imagine if we had the 5 salawat, we could pray at any time in the day, right? Imagine that. You could maybe do those 5 salawat back to back. in a very rushed fashion, or even not in a rushed fashion, but it means that you go the other 23 hours of your day without being reminded. But the way that the salawat are positioned throughout the days, it forces you to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It forces you to do your wudu or your ghusl, to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to enter the masjid, to go into the congregation, and it forces you to get on your knees and to ask for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and forgiveness and to glorify Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second thing is that it intrinsically links the Muslim to the natural world and to the order of the natural world. The Muslim is, when we talk about the salah and the times of the salah that are linked to the positionings, for example, of the sun in the day, it's the idea that the Muslim is part of nature. He's part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. He's not separate to it. And I suppose one of the ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of this is through the times for the salawat. That He reminds us that we are connected to nature, we are part of nature. And that's quite a profound lesson, actually, subhanAllah, in the world that we live in today, where sometimes we get carried away and we think that we are only masters of creation and the other creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore we exploit it and do not treat it in the way that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, one of the ahkam, without going into too long of a prelude, one of the ahkam I want to speak about very quickly is that to focus on, because we're looking at the Hanafi madhhab, one of the positions in which the Hanafis are more controversially, if I should say, known by. Does anyone want to take a guess? Asr time. Did the sisters hear that? The time of Asr. Yes, this is something that repeats. Why is it the Hanafis have a later Asr time? For the Asr prayer, this is an opinion according to Imam Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa radiallahu ta'ala anhu, of course, was one of the Salaf. So it cannot be brushed aside that his opinions, against the Salaf or not of the Salaf or not in adherence to the Salaf, when he radiallahu ta'ala anhu was one of the Salaf, right? However, it was an opinion that obviously the different madhhab disagreed with Abu Hanifa in, including his own students. Now, this is a very profound point, because the fact that Abu Hanifa's students disagreed with him is an important lesson. Abu Hanifa raised ulama. He raised mujtahids, people who were able to do ijtihad, to the extent that they were not afraid of criticizing their teacher. They studied, and he raised them to the point where they were able to challenge him, where they were able to say, we don't agree with that, where we take a different position. And that's quite a beautiful thing about early Islamdom, the early Islamic world, was the level of prestige was never above the honor and the respect that was given to ilm itself. You could be whoever you were, but the matter was a matter of ilm. The matter was a matter of knowledge. The matter was the matter of dalil, of evidence. Right? And people were able and free to discuss and debate that. But Imam Abu Hanifa himself actually has evidence for what he is stating. For example, Imam Abu Hanifa brings a hadith. There's a hadith narrated by Imam Abu Dawood, where it's mentioning a story in which Jibreel alayhi salam comes and prays with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is used to give evidence that essentially the dhuhr prayer, so Jibreel comes to, in this narration, Jibreel comes to pray with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam twice. On the first day, he leads the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in dhuhr, when the sun when the sun had declined from its zenith. And on the second day, he led in dhuhr prayer when the shadow of each thing became equal to its size, and asr prayer when the shadow of everything became double its size. And it was said between these times is the time of prayer for your nation. The point is here that through this narration, it's that when two things became equal, and basically imagine you put like a stick into the ground and you were to measure the shadow of that stick. Is it equal to its size or is it double to its size? The Ahnaf hold that it would still remain the time for Asr based on this narration, because the time for Dhuhr in which they prayed was still, Dhuhr was still in its prime time when they prayed. Tamam? It's a technicality here, and like I said, it's not the view of even Abu Hanifa's students. And I think probably one of the safer opinions to take is the position that you would probably be best to pray your dhuhr earlier on than to delay it. Right? That is probably the safer of two positions, is to pray your dhuhr earlier on than delaying it to the very late point. However, what I wanted to do by providing this narration by Abu Dawood, where it's talking about a very amazing incident where Jibreel is leading the Prophet ﷺ in prayer, is to explain to you that, once again, I'm trying to really drive this point home. The Hanafis are not doing it because they're against the sunnah, or they're doing something odd, or they're doing something that is opposed to the Prophet ﷺ, or they're doing something which is strange. Each madhhab has its dalil. Each madhhab has its understanding from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, it's then the role of the mujtahid to look and yurajjah al-adilla, yani to look at which of the adilla is strongest, what of the evidence is stronger than another bit of evidence or whatever. But that is not for us laymen to do, to say this is not upon the sunnah, when actually they have brought a hadith by Abu Dawood, or narrated rather by Abu Dawood. So this was the one point that I wanted to talk about in terms of this section of the matan of awqat as-salah, that the Hanafi position of the late Asr is valid. There is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where it does establish the fact that the time of Dhuhr remains. If you want to then delay the Asr prayer a bit, so you get between the two opinions and you're in the safest position or whatever, you can do that, inshallah. Try to pray your Dhuhr earlier, not because the second opinion is wrong, or one opinion is wrong and one opinion is right, but on the element here that you are taking the most precautious, or you're taking precaution, you're taking the most cautious route. So now we're getting into the proper stuff, because now we're going to go into shuroot as-salah. The reason why I say that is because, like I said, for the majority of me and you, we're just going to be relying on our phones for the time of salah. We live in a non-Muslim country, we're not even listening to the adhan. It's not even, listening to the time of the masjid. It's just we rely on our phones. For that reason, spending more time on this I don't think is necessary. It's just this point about the Asr time. The Hanafis have a dillah for this. And it's not the only opinion available in the Hanafi madhhab. So that's something I want to make clear. Ash-shart, we'll have the questions if you don't mind, just till we get at the end, inshallah, so we can get this over and done with, bidnillah. Ash-shart, this basically now shuroot salah. Ash-shart is the condition. ما يلزم ما لا يلزم وجوده الوجود ويلزم عدمه العدم. Once again, lovely Arabic things that you can memorize but don't necessarily mean anything to some of you present in the audience, and that's fine. But I think it's the principle here that a shart is what is necessary for the action to be accepted. Think of the shart, an easier way of breaking down what the shart is, or the condition, or what a condition is in usul al-fiqh, is the idea that the shart is something outside of the action which you are doing, but is necessary for the validity of the action. Are you following me? Shall I repeat it one more time? It is something necessary for the validity of the action, but it is not part of the action itself. And it will become very clear with the example. Can anyone give me an example of what they think this would be, for example, if we're looking at salah? I'm not picking on you. You can, which is a good thing. Should get the sister side. Okay.
Witr.
Exactly. Bizabt. Very, very good answer. At-tahara would be a perfect example of that. At-tahara is not part of the salah itself, but it's necessary for the salah to be accepted. فما لا يلزم وجوده الوجود. It is not necessary, it being present. You having tahara does not mean that you've prayed. But ولكن ما يلزم عدمه العدم. But if you haven't got tahara, your prayer isn't valid. You see the way that this is understood. For this is the shart in usul al-fiqh. So we have several shuroot as it pertains to salah. For example, shart number 1, which is the thing that has been pointed towards, although not directly this specific thing, is number 1 is a tahara, a cleanliness, or cleanliness of the body from al-hadath wal-khabath. We spoke about this last few sessions ago. Can anyone remember what these two things were? Al-hadath wal-khabath. I'm trying to make it a bit more interactive. I don't want it just to be me speaking at you for a year. Yes. Go ahead.
Is it like a physical and spiritual state?
Yes, you're getting there, mashallah. Yeah. So al-hadath is basically the state of being it's the state of impurity a human is in, right? Even if there's no physical impurities on him, al-khabath is the actual physical impurity that might be on someone's clothes or someone's body. Then the second condition is tahara, or the cleanliness of the clothes from al-khabath. وَثِيَابِكَ فَطَهِّرْ. Right? And as for your clothes, purify it, as the Prophet ﷺ was commanded. For the idea here is that if you have clothes, and we spoke about tahara last time, so I don't want to spend too much time looking at it, but for example, if you had some impurity on your thobe or on your shirt or on your dress, you would have to clean it and remove it before your salah was accepted, before you performed your salah, if you wanted your salah to be accepted. Because if you were to perform the salah and you found, for example, there was a large amount of impurity on your clothes, then this was, and you still prayed despite knowing this, the salah would not be accepted. The next condition, the third condition, is a tahara, or the cleanliness of the place from al-khabath. So where you're going to put the mu'adi' of the or the positions, the places where you do sujud, have to be clean. So where your feet are, where your knees are, where your face is, where your hands are, these places where you do your sujud have to be clean. Okay, they can't have dirt or things that are considered dirty rather by the Sharia. Dirt, obviously, turab is not in of itself dirty. It's not considered dirty in the Sharia. But I mean by dirt, I mean things like, for instance, if you end up, and it might happen to some of us here in the UK, for example, where you pray out in the street, you're rushed for time or something. I've done this on several occasions where I might have to rush and pray in the street or something, and you'll find it's a very dirty city a lot of the time. The people have, there's dog urine and there's things like this, and there's other things that you might have in the middle of the street. So obviously you cannot pray in places where there is filth, that is considered filth by the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we have the fourth condition, which is sitr al-awrah, covering the awrah. This is an important خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ. Here, the literal translation of this is what? خُذُوا, it's take your zina, take your adornment عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ, every time you go to the masjid, every time that you go to the masjid. However, the tafsir of this ayah is what? Is cover your awrah every time you pray. This is the tafsir of the ayah, is that this part of this ayah rather is talking about covering your awrah every time that you go to pray. Now, I think we should take a pause to discuss what the awrah is, because this is an area of relative importance, great importance actually. The awrah for a man is what is below the belly button until and including his knees. Okay? However, there are a few points to be made here. Men obviously should go out wearing modest and humble and dignified clothing. It is actually makruh, for example, it is disliked to pray with your shoulders uncovered as a man. You should pray with your shoulders covered. Men should not wear excessively tight clothing, nor should they go out with tank tops and very short shorts, and be, not only is it a source of fitna to others, but it's not a dignified state for a Muslim man to be in. A Muslim man should be in a state of, should be modest, should have dignity, should have karama. And these are important attributes. And the reason why I make this point is that we hear maybe sometimes what the awrah of a man is, and then automatically we think that, okay, it's fine then if men go and, they're not wearing any shirt and they've got very short shorts on and what have you, which is actually not a correct understanding of the fiqh ruling. And this is where we spoke about maybe a few sessions ago, this idea that if you do not have purity of the heart when you're coming to the ahkam of the sharia, you'll come out with very strange opinions, because you'll force the rulings to fit your desires. Whereas actually the sharia is not the black and white of this is halal and this is haram. There's a lot of grey as well. And it's not always that just because this thing is makruh means that, or just because it's not haram means I should do it, and just because it's not wajib means I shouldn't do it. Do you see what I mean? You say to someone this isn't wajib, for he translates it or she translates it into her head into what? What is it? I don't have to do it. And if I say to someone that this is haram, this isn't haram, what does that translate to? I can do it. That's not how the Sharia works. That's not how it should be if we're Muslims aspiring for ihsan. right? That's a message to myself and to the brothers, that just because the awrah is designated in this way does not mean that's the way that a Muslim should ever dress, right? And even in Salah, it is makruh, it is disliked for me or for you to pray with our shoulders uncovered. Muslims should be modest and dignified. For the woman, the awrah in the Hanafi madhhab, and this was a difference of opinion between Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. Does the awrah include the face, or does it not include the face? Okay, this was an area of disagreement even in the time of the Sahaba. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu was of the opinion that the face is included in the awrah, and Abdullah ibn Abbas was of the opinion that the face is not included in the awrah. This is what the woman cannot help but show, right? And therefore there is udhr here, and there is excuse here that she does not have to show. She can leave her face uncovered. The Hanafi position it takes on this view that the awrah is everything, every part of the woman except her face, her hands, and her feet. And the Hanafis are more unique in this, in that they even say that the feet are not awrah. Okay, because the feet are like the hands, so they would not consider this to be part of the awrah. However, if there is a fear of fitna, if there is a fear of strife or corruption, it is recommended that the woman in those circumstances cover her face as well, even in the Hanafi madhhab. And this is a unique position, or this is a unique thing to consider perhaps, because, or interesting I should say rather than unique. It's an interesting thing to consider because actually it's makruh for a woman in the Hanafi madhhab to pray with her face covered. It's makruh for a woman to pray with her face covered in the Hanafi madhhab. However, if it is held that her uncovering her face during the time of Salah would lead to fitna, then she is allowed to cover her face in this scenario. And generally the principle is what? I hope I don't upset the sister's side here. The general principle is the more the woman covers, the better, is the general principle, right? But it's not necessary. There's a difference then, you see, between what is virtuous and what is necessary. A woman has to cover everything except her hands, her feet, and her face in the Hanafi madhhab. Anything above that is virtuous, is a good thing to do. Inshallah, you'll find the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's not a necessary thing to do. And of course, this is part of the jihad of women. The men's jihad is a jihad of fighting on the battlefield, or it should be. Unfortunately, many of us are sitting here instead of doing that. And inshallah, one day we'll allow, Ya Rab, Ya Rab, Ya Rab. The position is that the men's jihad is going out and getting the money and fighting on the battlefield. And the women also have a jihad, and their jihad is part of it is this matter which has been put upon them, which is, I'm not saying by any means easy. Of course, especially in the world that we live in today, the society which we live in, plays on people's desires, plays on people's wants, plays on people's insecurities. And of course, it's very difficult to implement the hijab properly. Because remember, the hijab is not just covering and a piece of clothes. It is wide, loose clothes. It is not trying to attract the other gender. And it is modesty and hiding one's beauty. And that is not an easy or simple task. One should, if one has, for instance, sisters, or even one's mother or aunts or whoever in the family, or one's spouse or daughters who are trying to wear and observe the hijab, it should be treated with a matter of encouragement and understanding, as opposed to a position of harshness and reprimand. Because in the society which we're living in, it's not an easy ask, right? But it's still an obligation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So both parties try. Our role, especially now speaking to my fellow brothers, is the role of encouragement and understanding and support, right? When it comes to the women in our family or in our lives. And the role then for the women is the idea that even if one might not be able to observe, or even if one does not always observe full hijab, they keep on striving to perfect the hijab and the maqasid, the objectives of the hijab as well. So that was the fourth shart. The fifth shart pertains to facing the Qiblah. فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. This command, subhanallah, the command of facing the Kaaba, right, for the Qibla of the Muslimin, was repeated 3 times in the span of 2 ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah. 3 times. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeats it. To emphasize and to make clear and to cement in the minds of the Muslims that khalas, your Qibla has gone from a Masjid al-Aqsa to al-Masjid al-Haram, yani gone to al-Kaaba, which is our Qiblah to this day. It's important to understand that this is a necessary condition. Of course, there is a leeway for the Qiblah. You don't have to be exactly pointing at the Qiblah for it to not be accepted, but within, inshallah, 45 degrees, you will be given leeway to be facing towards the Qiblah, and you try to do your ijtihad. But nowadays, once again, what we're reliant on? We're reliant on the app or the compass app or whatever we use. The sixth condition of shart of the salah is that the time be correct. The time be correct. إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا. Right? Indeed, prayer was a time-bound obligation upon the believers. Time-bound. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. كتابا موقوتا. It's a time-bound obligation upon the believers. For the salah needs to be performed in its time. And we'll come into the issue in the Hanafi madhhab about joining prayers, inshallah. I think probably maybe in the third session. So maybe not next session. I think it might be next session or the session afterwards. Or is it the final session? I can't remember the ordering that we were doing. But we'll come into the issue about, can you join and pray your dhuhr and asr early, and can you pray your asr and dhuhr later, or rather your dhuhr later with your asr when you're traveling, because of course the Hanafis have what might be perceived by some people as a stricter opinion in this. But the idea is that the salah has to be performed in its time. The seventh condition is intention. And what does that different to, if you think about it, compared to something else that we're studying? Wudu is obviously something which is where the Hanafis do not stipulate the condition of intention. And then the final condition is takbirat al-ihram. Tamam? These are all of the conditions of salah, inshallah, according to the Hanafi madhhab. And then we move on to arkan al-salah. The rukn in fiqh is very similar to a shart in the way that it sounds when you listen to the definition, but it has a subtle and critical difference which we'll simplify as well, بإذن الله الكريم. Rukn is ما يلزم وجوده الوجود وعدمه العدم. Right? So it's very similar, but it's the idea its being present is evidence of the action being present, and its absence is evidence of the action being absent. So an easier way of understanding rukn in usul al-fiqh would be to say that it is something which is part of the action itself. So we have a few arkan of the salah that we'll go through to, inshallah. For example, the first point, the first rukn would be standing in the non-nawafil prayers for those who are able. Okay? This is a rukn of a salah. You have to stand for your salah, for the ones that are the fara'id of the salawat, for those who are able. If you're not able, then you don't need to. Right? If there's an illness or there's a fear that your present illness will increase as a result of the standing, then you do not have to. And of course, for the supererogatory prayers, which are the nawafil prayers, then these salawat can be performed sitting down anyway, even if you have good health. The second shart is reading an ayah in each rak'ah, in the two fard rak'ahs. Now this is an interesting one, because there is evidence in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that the one who does not read al-Kitab, there is no prayer for this person. So we're going to enjoy a little bit. I know it's late and we're nearly at 8 p.m, but who doesn't want to study a little bit of usul al-fiqh at 7:41 p.m, right? Can I see some more smiles? I'm seeing some smiles in the front row, mashallah. The reason why is because the Hanafis take a very interesting perspective. Once again, it's not about, you're going to get sick of me. You're going to get sick of hearing this from me, inshallah, by the time we're finished with this course. It's not about the Hanaf opposing the sunnah. It's about a way of approaching the sunnah that's different. Because they take the idea فَقْرَعُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ right? من القرآن. This is a juz من الآية of the Quran. So read what is easy for you from the Quran, right? And they say that this means that whatever تيسر من القرآن, that's all you have to read. وإن كانت بس آية, يعني even if it's just one ayah, you read it in each rak'ah, and that's all you need to do, right? For this hadith, it's about approaching a hadith in this, and this is going to be very asuri, so if you get it, you get it. If you don't get it, don't worry about it. It's not that important at this stage. But it's the idea that Ahnaf would look at this hadith and say, this is, if I was to take it literally, it would mean it is nasikh of this ayah. It would mean it is abrogation of this ayah. Whereas the Shafi'is would take that this hadith, if we take it up front, it would imply that this ayah, this hadith is takhsis, is specifying what the ayah has not said. So these two approaches to dealing with this hadith vis-a-vis or in relation to the ayah leads to different opinions. It leads to the Shafi'is taking the opinion that according to this hadith, reading the Fatihah is an obligatory rukn of the salah, without which the salah will not be accepted. And for the Ahnaf, they will say that it is something preferable, but the meaning of the hadith is that there is no complete salah in its perfection without reading al-Kitab or al-Fatihah, but it is not necessary because the Quran here takes precedence. And the hadith has not come to abrogate the Quran, which is what they would say it is necessitated in this case, but rather it's talking about the completeness of the salah is not achieved without the recitation of Fatihah al-Kitab. We'll leave some time for questions as well, by the way, if anyone wants a bit more clarification. Bi'idhnillahi al-Kareem. The third rukn is al-ruku'. Is going into bowing. And we'll speak about, I think, next session about the sunnah and about how this should be done, about how the back should be straight and how the fingers should be spread over the knees. And we'll speak about some of this in more detail, but we're talking now just about the bare bones. The bare bones. Because I want to reiterate here, if you don't have this in your salah, the salah is not accepted. And if it's there, inshallah, or it's not valid. Allahu alam. This is also an important thing. It's a slip up that inshallah we can extract wisdom from. There's a difference between valid and accepted. The salah on paper is valid or not valid. Accepted or not accepted, Allahu alam. We hope that Allah accepts just one sajda from us, right? But we try to perform it according to the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that is valid. So without these things, the salah will not be valid. And with these things, inshallah, the salah is valid in the sharia. Whether it's accepted or not accepted, that is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to decide. The fourth is sujud, is prostration. The fifth is the ordering, at-tartib, of the standing, then the bowing, and the prostration. You can't just do it in any order that you want. It has to be in the order that the Prophet ﷺ prayed. And the final, condition or rukn, pillar, is the final sitting to perform tashahhud. Right? These are the arkan of the salah. And you might say, well, where's the second sitting? For instance, you're praying 4 rak'ahs and you don't sit for the second sitting. Where is that? That's because it's not a rukn min arkan salah. You might say, where's al-Fatihah? We talked about that because it's not considered a rukn min arkan salah. You might be saying, what about takbirat besides takbirat al-ihram? Well, that's not a rukn min arkan salah. These things which are very important to our salawat, but technically if they were not included, the salah would still be considered valid. And that's important to understand because one shouldn't knowingly neglect or not do these things in their salah. However, should one find out, for example, that they maybe recently converted, they didn't know that was part of the salah would still be counted as valid. Or for instance, out of forgetfulness, they didn't include it, then the salah would still be considered as valid, inshaAllah ta'ala. Moving into wajibat as-salah. The wajibat are lesser in ranking than the arkan. So if they are missed out accidentally, one must do sajdatul sahw. So the sajda of forgetfulness, and we'll come into that I think in the third session in this series, the Salah series, yani. So if one forgets it and misses it, they should perform this sajda forgetfulness. However, if one misses it intentionally, then the Salah is not valid. You see the difference here? Missing it out of forgetfulness is pardoned with the sajda of forgetfulness. However, missing it out intentionally is not allowed and would render the Salah invalid. And this is a wonderful thing because people hear stuff, and mashallah, the way that people do buffet fiqh is they'll hear maybe what the Ahnaf, they don't require reading al-Fatihah in the Salah. So what does that mean? We don't need to recite Fatihah. MashaAllah, we set the bar so low for ourselves. But no, to miss out Surah Al-Fatiha intentionally would render the Salah, even in the Hanafi madhhab, invalid. For no reason. Another example would be Qunut al-Witr, which is the position about the Ahnaf hold that the Witr Salah is wajib. We'll come into this in the final session about Fiqh Salah, inshallah, in further detail, because of course, as some of you might know, the Ahnaf, they pray their Witr slightly differently from the other madhhab in terms of the fact that they pray 3 rak'ahs, they have 2 sittings in it, and they do the qunut before the ruku'. These are 3 things by which the Ahnaf distinguish themselves in the way, the kayfiyah of how they perform their Witr Salah. The other thing, of course, is the idea, and we'll come into this later, is that they hold Witr is wajib. Not fard, but wajib. Meaning, not performing it is a grave matter, but it's not as grave or is not as bad as not performing the fard salawat, but it should be made up. And it is wajib, meaning that if you were to deny it, that would be a sin, but would not be kufr. Kufr would be to deny, for example, Salat al-Isha, right? Or Salat al-Maghrib, or whatever, this, to deny believing in it, right? Which is not the case with Witr. We have a bit of time to go into Witr, but I think I'll leave that, inshallah, to the special salawat. And I'm going to open up for questions, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. It might seem like a slightly short class, like in reality, I'm being cautious. I've got the sunnah here as well if we wanted to go through it. But I'm cautious of the fact that actually we've gone through lots of different things. And it'd be better for all of us, inshallah, to take bit by bit and to go into the sunnah next week with some other things that relate to, adab al-salah, mathalan. And then maybe go into mufsadat al-salah in the next session as well. Because I don't want to overload your minds with lots of information. Even though some of the stuff might be very elementary or very understood, we're now taking things that, for example, that many of us might have known when we were growing up about how to pray salah, but we're now seeing, inshallah, the adillah for it, the evidence for it, and also organizing it in a way that is in accordance to the way that the madhhab works. For instance, we might know how to pray because this is how we saw our fathers or our mothers praying. But we didn't really know that this is necessary or this isn't necessary, or this we can miss out or we can't miss out, or what do we do when we forget it. So what I'm hoping to do is that whilst many of this stuff, especially with salah, maybe less so for things like zakat and hajj and umrah and siyam and whatnot, but especially for salah, because alhamdulillah, all of us, inshallah, we all pray our 5 salawat, and we have been, for a while. It's the idea that we're organizing what we grew up doing and knowing into a way that is the way that the fuqaha think, in terms of their way of understanding and organizing thoughts and rulings and ahkam into arkan, into shuroot, into sunan, into things that are mustahab, things that are makruhat, mufsidat, things that break nawaqid, mathalan. This is the way that a faqih thinks, and this is the way that we're going to try to train ourselves to begin to think, because this is the way that we understand the ahkam of the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I open up now for any questions. Inshallah, let me put on my glasses so I can actually see, because I think I saw someone raise their hand.
Okay, back in the day, when I was growing up, I was told that when I start praying, I make an intention. I'm praying Maghrib Salah, and I'm facing the Qiblah. And I was taught, then I learned that I don't need to, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows which Salah I'm doing. Is that correct? I don't need to make an intention.
So when you say making intention, you mean, and this is something that's very common, that people say like, and by the way, which is really common, by the way, and the Shaykh will vouch for this. This is very, if the Shaykh is still here, I don't know if he is. No, I think he's left. But this is very common in Egypt. In Egypt, this is like a thing that's almost comical. Like people will go and they'll stand like Anwi, Salli, Rak'atain, Salat al-Fajr, whatever, and they'll say it out loud and they'll give the full spiel about what they're about to do. No, it's not necessary in terms of that. It's not. There's nothing from the Quran or the Sunnah that states that this is how you declare your intention. But it's a way of helping someone establish the intention of themselves. So it's not necessary, and it wouldn't mean that your salah is invalid, but it helps some people clarify to themselves. Because in salah you get a lot of waswasa, you get a lot of whispers, and some people they have speak things like OCD or whatnot, and they'll begin to worry, was I doing this with my intention or whatever. And so some people, they find that maybe saying I'm about to pray 3 rak'ahs salat al-maghrib mathalan, that helps them, but it's not necessary. No, don't worry, it's not necessary.
Sheikh, I have a couple of questions. So before my question, about that question, something I realized is I think it's more of a problem of knowing what the definition of intention is, because I think I've seen a lot of people, they think that intention means verbally, but the definition of intention is that you can have intention in your heart, basically. So without saying the verb, you still have intention, so you're still making intention, but you're just not saying it.
Yeah, of course.
I have 2 questions, or 2 or 3 questions. The first question is, when you said you need the purity of the heart when you're looking at Sharia, if you don't think, was that reference to Imam Shafi'i's saying?
Imam Malik, the one that I mentioned before, yeah. Let's attribute to Imam Malik. Yeah.
Because I was reading that the other day,
it was up, and that's true. The idea that he who does not have purity of the heart, or tasawwuf in its real meaning, and does fiqh, he will turn out a fasiq, someone who is gravely sinful, and someone who does tasawwuf and does not have fiqh, he'll turn out a zindiq. Yani.
Second question is, so takbiratul ihram.
No.
From what I knew, it was a pillar of salah, but to now I understand it's not a pillar of salah, it's a condition. So that means it's not actually part of the salah, is it? Because you said it.
Yeah, this is a technicality, and we can come to the words of the mu'allaf here in terms of this, and it's obviously someone you've been paying close attention, because it is. If I could repeat the question, both of them or just the first one? Okay. So the sheikh asked in the audience. He said that if you notice that the 8th, I think it is, and it's mentioned here. Let me pull it up. The 8th condition for the salah is takbirat al-ihram. And so why is it that takbirat al-ihram is mentioned as a condition and not as a rukn of the salah? And I'm just going to put it up here, inshallah. Give me 1 minute. It's an interesting one because no, it's not here. 1 second, bear with me. Maybe it's in the other book. He hasn't mentioned it in this actually. It's in Mumkin al-Lubab. I'll check in al-Lubab for you. But the idea that takbirat al-ihram is a shart as opposed to a rukn, there's probably an usuli technicality to it. But I can't think off the top of my head why he's included it in terms of it's not part of the arkan but part of the shuroot of salah.
And last question for me, sorry. In terms of the Hanafi dalil of Fatihah not being part of the rukn or the arkan, it just slipped my mind what you said, but was it Surah Muzammil, right? فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ.
فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. This is the dalil. This is the dalil of the Ahnaf to hold that reading al-Fatiha is not necessary. You just have to read 1 ayah. This is the bab one. If someone was to, rather we should clarify, because once again we don't want people to misunderstand. If someone was just to read 1 ayah, that would be enough for the salah to be valid. However, if they purposely miss out the Fatiha, their salah would not be valid, right? So there's a nuance here.
I think I'm on the back. Yes.
I've got 2 questions. Question 1. Do you have to choose one method and stick to that way of praying? Mm-hmm. Or can you sort of mix and match?
Okay.
Do Ramadan or say moving your finger at the tashahhud? Second question is, when you have a first salah like 4 rak'ahs like Isha, so in the first 2 you pray Surah Fatihah and a short surah, say, and the last 2 is just Surah Fatihah. So if you join the prayer late, so if you're following the Imam, do you follow, so in the quiet part, so would you read Surah Fatihah and your short surah like your first 2 rak'ahs, or do you follow the Imam and just, which way around do you do it?
Okay. So,
Because you answer the question.
Okay, inshallah.
someone's going to have to do a lot of editing work today, or whenever they get to do it. If that's you, Allah ya'eenak. If that's not you, Allah ya'een hadha rajul or whatever that has to do that. Okay, so the first question was to do with the fact that can you mix and match different madhhab? This is an area that we spoke about more last time. Al-Muhim. It's the idea that if you were to mix and match madhhab, it might seem like you're just only mixing and matching ahkam, but in reality you're mixing and matching. We spoke about this in the first two sessions. You're mixing and matching two methodologies of approaching the adillah. And that's kind of what we're talking about with the Fatihah. And I know it kind of maybe went over a lot of people's heads, but it's take it just for, even if it just sounds like random gibberish, it's a methodology. The reason why the Ahnaf and the Shawafi', the Hanafis and the Shafi'is differ on interpreting this hadith is the idea that they fundamentally disagree with how to approach a hadith that relate to the Quran in particular circumstances. The Ahnaf take it as naskh, as abrogation. The Shafi'is take it as takhsis, as specification of the ayah. Like I said, it sounds very heavy and it's a very complex matter in usul al-fiqh, but the reality is that you're not mixing ahkam, you're mixing methodologies, and therefore to mix between different ahkam would not be as simple as just saying that I think this is a stronger opinion. You'd end up having internal contradictions. You'd end up holding that al-amr yufid al-wujub in this case, but yufid al-istihbab in this case. In English, the command in the Arabic language denotes obligation in this scenario, but in this scenario it denotes just something that's preference. I know this is like, straight, it's a little bit complex, but I think the thing I'm trying to get to is that so there's a science in the Sharia. I know that we're short on time, so bear with me. There's a science in the Sharia called takhrij al-furu' ala al-usul. The issue here is the idea that al-furu', the ahkam that you're talking about, are the end result of differences in approaching the Arabic language and approaching the evidences. So you're taking the end result and mixing them together, but actually the reason why they're different is because there's two different approaches that you're talking about in the usul. And if you were to mix and match, you'd have no clear usul. Your usul would be all mixed up. It would be contradictory. You'd be taking sometimes in this way and then taking sometimes in that way. And therefore it would not be consistent. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So sticking to one madhhab allows you to be consistent. Allows you to say that I approach the Arabic language in one way. It allows you to say I approach the evidences in one way. I'm consistent in the way that I approach the Quran and the Sunnah and how they interact with each other. I'm consistent in how I understand the Arabic language. I'm consistent in how I understand nasakh wal mansukh, and abrogation and what's abrogated. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Whereas if you were to mix and match, it might seem innocent, but actually you're being internally contradictory. You're saying that I sometimes approach the Arabic language like this, but then in this one issue I approach it in a different way. Why? Sometimes I approach the Quran and the Sunnah's relationship like this, but then sometimes I choose my mind and I just say I approach it like this, which would be contradiction. So it seems innocent to me and you, but there's a reason why these different opinions have emerged. Tamam? The second issue, which pertains to the idea of joining the Salah late. I'm trying to pull it up here in my if you bear with me. At the bare minimum, one of course should recite Surah Al-Fatihah if it's a quiet prayer, and that is what is necessary. However, you would want to pray. Is this the idea that it is qada or is not qada? You would recite the Fatihah and a surah, because you're making up the two rak'ah. Let me try to explain this. There's a difference between qada and then praying extra. Qada is making up what you missed. So when you join late, you're making up the two rak'ahs, for example, that you missed. So you'd recite quietly to yourself those two surah of the Quran, because you're making up what you missed from the Imam. So for example, if you joined in you're asking, like, if you joined in the third rak'ah, What would you do? Is that, if I answered your question correctly?
Yes. You're going to the Jama'at very late.
Yeah.
So the Imam is now in the third rak'ah.
Yes.
But they will only read Surah Fatihah, so you will be quickly going into your
Yes, because you're making up the
time to read Surah Fatihah and the Surah.
It's fine, it's not necessary. Reciting an extra surah after Surah Al-Fatihah aslan anyway is not necessary. If you can do it, great. If you can't, it's fine.
The idea is that you do your first hadith you started, so it's Surah Fatihah and Surah, and then make up the missing after the Salah. And then read Surah Fatihah after the Salah. Does that make sense?
Not really. Can you repeat that?
You join, say the third rak'ah. So you do your Surah Fatihah and your, if you can read the Surah. When the Imam says Salah, you stand up and continue.
Yes.
And then in those two, you just read Surah Fatihah.
In the next, you just read Surah Al-Fatihah. You mean the two after the Imam has given salam? Yes, you just read Surah Al-Fatihah. Any final questions?
Could you just clarify, do women need to wear socks for salah and hiding stand?
So the awrah is the woman in the Hanafi madhhab. The feet are not considered part of awrah, so she wouldn't have to.
Is Muslim pro-Arab virtually used for create time?
I think so, but I swear this is something outside of the realm of politics, and they can preferably, whoever's doing the editing, edit this out, because this is just now more of a personal conversation. I think there was something reported. Does anyone remember that they were selling information to the Americans or something about their users? Yeah, I think this was found out a while ago, and that's why I deleted it. If it's for Salah times, it's fine, but I want to double check that and get back to you. I think they were taking the information of users and selling it to the American government. Yeah, I think so, but let me double check that. But for the times, it's fine. But pillars is what I use. It's called pillars, yeah. But yeah, I mean they're both the same for kind of times. It's fine, inshallah. But just I'll get back to you about that. Yeah.
So, Sheikh, I got a bit confused with your response about the first Salah. So, you turn up late for Salah, and the Imam's on his third rak'ah. Technically, we're on our first rak'ah, aren't we? That's what you're saying. Right. We're not on the third, we're on the first rak'ah. And so, we just set our Fatihah as a minimum. And if we can do another surah, so be it. If not, it's not a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So the back there. What did you say
happens if we miss a rukn?
Oh, the salah is not accepted. It's not valid, yani.
So you have to redo the whole salah?
Yes, you'd have to redo this whole salah.
Yes.
Last question for you, Sheikh. You mentioned the Taharatul Makan.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, for example, let's say I want to pray here at Fitya Center, right? And I don't have musalla, so I'm looking at the floor, and I don't see any physical dirt. However, people walk in here with their shoes, etc., or when their shoes go outside. So is it permissible for me to? Because I think one of my teachers said that this is a different madhhab, but would I be able to pray here without musalla? And on top of that, maybe a secondary question: is it necessary for me to remove my shoes if I pray here without musalla?
No and no. Oh, yeah, yes and yes. So depending on how you answer the question, sorry, let me go back into that. No, it's fine. Even if you can't see if you can't see the look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not burden us with more than we can bear. If you can't see al-asl al-ibaha, right? This is the qaida in the Sharia. The principle in the Sharia is that the asl is that things are allowed until you have evidence that they're not allowed. So the asl is that this is clean. Right, this is clean. Even if people have gone out, otherwise, you're just going to spend your life worrying that did someone step into something and then step here or whatever. And if you can see that it's clean, it's clean. And by the way, the land is purified. For example, if something completely dried up or whatever, it'd be pure for you to. It's not. You don't know whether anything was. Maybe there was najis here. It dried up. It's okay. You're not mukallaf. You're not responsible for that, inshallah. You're responsible just to look and to investigate the matter as much as you're able. Tamam. And if you were to pray with your shoes on, as long as you are sure that you didn't step in anything that was dirty or whatever, then it's fine to pray in your shoes outside of the masjid.
Yes.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
You mentioned for the non-nawafil salah that it's allowed to pray sitting down.
Yes.
Is this something that's like a sunnah that we can fulfill, or is it something that we should always stand up to pray nawafil?
There is more reward in praying it standing, double the reward inshallah. Or rather, you get the full reward, and if you pray sitting down and you don't need to, you get half the reward inshallah. It's something that you can do. And it's very useful. Maybe sometimes you're in the car or something, you're facing the Qiblah, so you want to pray without getting out of the car. That's fine, inshallah, or some scenario, inshallah. Yes.
So is the sujud on the knees or on the floor?
For when you're praying sitting down?
You know the word sujud, is it partway in your...
Yes, so there's the sujud. When we mean sujud, we mean the prostration where you put your hands and face on the floor. That's the sujud. That's the prostration.
And also, you know if you're out and you're like trying to turn out of prayer, can a woman pray outside as well or no?
A woman can pray outside, but obviously it's better for a man and a woman to pray in a masjid, not to expose themselves to harm or to danger or anything like this. And especially as well if to be blunt with you as well, especially if someone's wearing tighter clothes or things like this, because of the motions in the salah, it's better that a woman does it in a more private place. And the same goes for a man as well. So one should try to find a musalla or a masjid to pray in, inshallah, if possible.
Any more questions?
Finding Qiblah while flying.
Sorry?
Flying an aeroplane while visiting.
We'll come into that, inshallah, about how do you do salah. To be honest, just 2 more minutes, inshallah. One of my shuyukh who taught me Hanafi fiqh, because I studied the Shafi'i madhhab as well, but he's the one who taught me Hanafi fiqh. He took a very strict opinion on playing on airplanes, and he just basically said that it's basically not like his position was. We'll come into this in more detail. His position was you only pray on airplanes sitting down to honor the time of salah, but the salah itself is not valid. Because he held that it doesn't meet any of the conditions. It doesn't meet the major condition or arkan. You can take a lighter opinion than that, maybe. But I think for airplanes, the thing that I'll say before we'll go into it more in the final session is you really ought to try to pray in the airport or before you fly than putting yourself in a position where you pray on the flight sitting down. If you're praying it on the flight sitting down, next we'll come back to this, still pray it to honor the time, but then make up that prayer again after you get off the flight. So you can do it standing, inshallah.
Any other? Yes.
Sorry, you know you're trying to learn how to pray, but the person that you was learning from is doing things different to what I'm learning here.
Yeah.
How do I go about that? Do I just say to her, sorry, I don't do your way, or...?
No, I mean, look, what time is Maghrib today? Because I don't want to make it too late.
5 minutes, okay, we got 5 minutes, inshallah. All these things have evidence, and all these things have evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah. And so no one's doing wrong, and you're not doing wrong, and they're not doing wrong. But what I'm doing here is I'm teaching according to Hanafi madhhab. If someone else is teaching in accordance to, for instance, the Shafi'i madhhab or the Hanbali madhhab, that's fine. But you take and you see, if you're a Hanafi, you just look into what the Hanafi madhhab does for prayer, and the person teaching you, you thank them and you learn from them, and you don't have to necessarily do as they're doing. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, because she's following wearing socks and standing right next to each other, joining feet.
Yeah.
She has more than one.
Yeah.
No, I understand. And she's free to do that. But you can listen to her and benefit from her. And then if you want to stick to the Hanafi madhhab, you just stick to how the Hanafi madhhab does it, inshallah.
I think there was a final question,
Regarding the Fatihah, you said Hanafis believe that you don't need to, but it's better to do it. To say it, right? But if you deny it, then your salah is...
This was the interpretation of the hadith. It's the understanding of the hadith in the Hanafi madhhab, or according to the Hanafi way of thinking or methodology, is that Al-Fatihah is necessary for the completeness of the salah, but without it, the salah would still be valid under certain conditions. However, if you know Surah Al-Fatihah, for example, and you purposefully miss it out for no reason in an obligatory salah, then no, your salah would not be valid.
So like if you don't know Fatihah and you only know like one ayah,
Yeah, it'd still be valid. Exactly. Yeah. Tamam. Allah yubarik fikum. Inshallah, next session we'll be going through the sunan and the adab of salah, and maybe as well mufsidat al-salah. Inshallah. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Jazakumullah kullu khair. Please do remember myself and the team and everyone here in your du'as. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.